Welcome to a special emergency edition of Andy and Ari On3. You hear the horns, you know what that means. Yeah, there is a firing in college football. The first firing of a head coach by a general manager in college football. Troy Taylor fired at Stanford by general manager Andrew Luck. That's right, the Andrew Luck who took over recently as Stanford's general manager. Ari, there's a lot of big picture pieces to this. Like, this is the first time we've seen this. I don't think it's going to be the last.
Yeah, because we questioned, like, with the new GM position in college football, what the responsibilities are and what the power is and how far that extends, right? Like, there were people who were making less than $100,000 a year a few years ago being GMs of programs. And now you're seeing something like this. It's a completely different atmosphere. And the thing that's kind of different too is the GM responsibilities from school to school also vary. Like in the NFL, like if you're a GM, what your responsibilities are. You're a roster assembly. You're in charge of the scouts. You've got, I feel like
it is different in every NFL franchise too. Like Howie Roseman's responsibilities in Philadelphia are pretty broad. Like, he's over all their trainers, their strength coaches, their coaches.
The NFL have had personnel control too. So like, I guess you're right. But like, it's much different in college on a case-to-case basis than it is in the NFL. There's certain things that are different. Sure. But the entire position could be like low-ranking staffer to a person who can fire the coach and everything in between at this point. But I wonder if this is going to be the new norm, period.
Yeah. And so let's tell everybody what happened here, because if you're not up to speed on this, we talked about this on Friday's show. There was an ESPN story that detailed two different internal investigations that Stanford did into how Troy Taylor treated his subordinates as the head coach at Stanford. Both of them found stuff that was not good. The fact that there was a second one after there was a first one suggests that Troy Taylor didn't get the point of the first one. I'm still a little unclear about how, if nothing changed other than people found out about this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm assuming they're going to have to pay Troy Taylor out for this. And they owed him a lot of money. They owed him like $20 million. So, because nothing substantially changed other than people found out how he was acting. And I'm sure that didn't go over well in the Stanford community. But let's be real here. He was 3-9 in 2 years. They're bad. He's not good enough for this job. And the fact that he was treating people badly makes it much worse. Like, there's lots of coaches who are jerks who win, but you can't really be a jerk who loses without getting fired.
Yeah. And I think that also too, like, you have to separate, because I was reading a little bit about this, in the time since we last talked about it on our show. It's like when you start acting differently towards women, like that's just more, there's more to it than just being an asshole, right? Like that's a thing and a bridge that you can't travel down in his position. And also too, the thing you have to consider here, Andy, is that when your general manager is not just a former player, but somebody who I assume holds Stanford and its code of conduct and of course the university's reputation at a pretty high standard, you're probably going to have less wiggle room. Like I'm sure Andrew Luck was less willing to try to fix this than somebody who has no tie to the university, having been there as a player, and somebody who is defined by large part what he did there. So like this is just a really tough situation. And of course, tough situations are made easy when the coach's track record in terms of the production isn't there either.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes it easier. Now, the question is, what do you do if you're Andrew Luck right now? Because this is a very inopportune time to be firing a coach. I don't know that you can make a hire right now. We have seen it happen in the past. Lance Leipold was hired at Kansas, I believe, on the last day of spring practice. So he's been successful there. It's doable, but it's not ideal. And Andrew Luck has said since the firing, they may just name an acting coach for the 2025 season, or they may go look for somebody. I don't know. I think it depends on who they can get more than anything else. But they have a little bit of time, I guess. It's spring break at Stanford right now. In fact, there are staffers and players on vacation scattered to the four winds, and spring practice starts next week. So I assume we'll get some details about that in the next few days.
Yeah. And the profile of the coach, I think, is going to be interesting in terms of like, you know, who they want, who they think is necessary. Do you go for a David Shaw type? Do you try to depart from that? You know, these are the things that I am very curious to see what Stanford does, because as we talked last week, dude, like Stanford, I think, has a pretty powerful sales pitch.
Yes.
And like, I don't think that I think them being this bad is more of an anomaly than how good they were at times during the Shaw era, right? Like, shouldn't it be more somewhere in the middle between those two things, but more years like that than bad ones there?
They should not. Well, look, as dominant as they were during the Shaw era and the tail end of the Harbaugh era, I don't know that is going to happen in this era of college football, although it might. There are very rich Stanford grads. You just have to activate them. So you could conceivably raise a bunch of money and then be able to pay a bunch of people. But if you don't have that, if you're just doing revenue sharing, which puts you in line with the other schools in the ACC right now that aren't Clemson, I don't expect dominance, but you should be able to be pretty good. And even in this era, even in the NIL era, what you can sell from an academic standpoint is so much better than almost anything else. I mean, you're selling essentially the equivalent of an Ivy League education, but you get to play power conference football.
Yeah. I'm wondering too, like, if you did a list of schools that are most likely to increase or improve their positioning in the modern pantheon of college football with the addition of revenue sharing, if Stanford should be like number one on the list because of that exact reason. Like, you're getting that bang for your buck with the education. You're playing power football. You're in the ACC. You get to live in a beautiful area of the country. Like, I just feel like there's a lot there.
Yeah, there's a ton there. And I was, in contact today with somebody who graduated from Stanford, who understands the program very well. And their idea was, hey, look, if we as the Stanford community could tap into some of the more wealthy donors, some of this stuff's just a rounding error. I mean, we actually saw it with the wife of Oracle founder Larry Ellison, who's a Michigan fan. She helped convince her husband to help underwrite Bryce Underwood going to Michigan, the number one recruit in the country. And Larry Ellison's not a Michigan guy. So, like, imagine if it's somebody who did graduate from Stanford, who does want to make a difference at Stanford. You've got some very wealthy tech company founders. We're not talking millionaires, we're talking billionaires that they might be able to tap into. And then all of a sudden it's a very different deal.
Can somebody just like post a picture of Steve Jobs in the garage right now on River? Do you have it available? Like, I don't know. Like, there's got to be one of those flying around somewhere. But yeah,
I mean, the founders of Google.
Yeah. And they have like cool offices with segways there, and everything's outdoors, and everyone's sitting, crisscross applesauce, right? Like, that's like
it's also right down the road.
Right down the road. Andy, do you want to keep talking about Stanford, or do you want to talk about GM's roles now? Because think that's the most fascinating.
I think we should talk about Andrew Luck specifically before we talk about GMs in general.
Andrew Luck.
Because Andrew Luck makes this very interesting. Obviously, great Stanford quarterback, excellent quarterback with the Indianapolis Colts, retired probably in his prime, and was shocking when he did. He's now taken this role, which I was a little surprised when he took it. And now this may have wound up being more than he bargained for, but I've been told he's not interested in coaching. I would actually love it if he tried. I think he'd be great at it. He's brilliant. Yeah. He understands Stanford. He understands how to deal with smart kids. Like, I would love it if he tried. I don't think he's going to, but I would love it if he did.
Because that's what Andrew Luck is, right? Like, he was a brainiac too. I don't know how much people remember about him, but like, he was a freak athlete, sure, but like also the smartest guy in every room he's ever walked into.
Yeah. And he's ideal to deal with it. And this is what I said the other day when we were talking about the Troy Taylor situation. Like, and Andrew Luck was on the committee that hired him, so there is some sort of blame here also. But like, you can't hire somebody who's that thick-headed to coach at Stanford. The players are all smarter than that person. That's going to be a problem. So David Shaw, meanwhile, also a Stanford guy, but understood who he was dealing with. Jim Harbaugh, a Michigan man, he fit in great there. Now, Jim Harbaugh never quite fits in with his superiors and his bosses, and those relationships don't always go well, but he got the players there really well. So it's really about finding a fit here. And if you can't immediately find that fit, which right now, late March, that's going to be hard to do, then you wait and figure out what you can do after that. I'll give you one name that I would love if they would contact. I don't even know if they could get him right now. Dave Clawson was great at Wake Forest.
Yeah.
But he's still working at Wake Forest. So he may still be under his old coaching contract, just amended version of it. I don't know if they'd let him go somewhere in the league.
And his retirement was predicated on not wanting to coach anymore too, wasn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he'd do it, but it is the type of job that I think he would really thrive in.
Yeah.
So I'll throw that name out there. But I don't know what you do. I think if you're Andrew Luck, you go interim and then have a nationwide search, see if you can tap into some of those big donors and throw big money at something. Like, take a huge swing. Like, try to remember how surprised we were when LSU hired Brian Kelly and USC hired Lincoln Riley. Like, come up with the kind of money to do that.
Yeah. This is going to be the worst suggestion of all time. Okay. And maybe I shouldn't even say it, considering how this tenure ended and how the other tenure that I'm going to bring up ended. But like, Pat Fitzgerald is the type of person that has existed in that situation for a very long time. And I don't even remember like, how did they, like, the findings of what actually happened there and how much
it's still going on. And here's the problem with trying to hire Pat Fitzgerald right now. Pat Fitzgerald is in the middle of suing Northwestern for his buyout. His whole argument is that getting fired from Northwestern because of the allegations of player hazing, that is keeping him from getting other employment as a football coach. If someone hires him as a football coach, it kind of knocks out your argument. So if I'm Pat Fitzgerald, I'm going to probably carry that argument through until I find out if I get some money.
Or if you're Pat Fitzgerald, you actually just try to get a head coaching job at a place like Stanford, which is probably what he wants.
They owe him like $70 million. Sorry. I think I'd probably hold on.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. But like, I don't know, like, there is some question about whether or not he was actually ultimately culpable for all those things too, right? Like, I don't know.
Right. And that's why he's fighting it. Yes.
So and if that's the case, then is there a coach out there? Like, he was like born for that. He's already proven that how many times did he take Northwestern to the Big Ten championship game?
Right. And he was a player for Northwestern. So kind of understands the boat that those guys are in. David in the chat says Lance Leipold. That'd be a good hire. Lance Leipold is really expensive. Lance Leipold makes a ton of money at Kansas right now because Kansas very much values Lance Leipold. So this is one where if you're gonna take a big swing, he'd be a big swing because you have to pay a bunch for him. Yeah. So remember, they hired Troy Taylor from Sacramento State. So you have to aim a lot higher this time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like what you would do is just to Google coaches who routinely get more out of less, right? And then those are the names that kind of pop up. And I don't know if
Manny Diaz, he's also in the league.
Dave Doran, I don't know if he would ever do that. He's usually got a pretty good thing going on.
Yeah, and Dave Doran's recruiting situation, like the recruiting pool at NC State's a hell of a lot bigger than the recruiting pool at Stanford.
I've got a weird
Georgia fan. We're not going to say Mike Bobo. If you don't want Mike Bobo to be your OC, you're going to have to do something about that yourself.
I love how the Georgia fans are so passionate about not Mike Bobo that they're actively promoting him in like live chats. It's hilarious. Jimbo Fisher. No, I'm kidding. You know what would be a really interesting one?
Who?
And I don't know if he would ever do it. And I don't know, you might not even think he's a cultural fit just based on like him being a hard ass, but like Fran Brown would move the needle there, wouldn't he?
No, because he's a hard ass who gets his players and who wants his players to be successful in life. And you talk to Fran Brown about the way he handles his business and the way
he's a hard ass in a good way.
Exactly. You can. That's the thing. Like, you can be a hard ass. You can yell at players. You can do all that stuff. That doesn't matter as long as you show them you care, and as you show the other people you work with that you care. And so Fran Brown, I think he fits that well. Jeff in the chat, Chris Peterson. That is a great idea. Former Boise State and Washington coach Chris Peterson. So Chris Peterson doesn't ever want to be at a place where he's a rock star, most famous person in town. Like, he wouldn't want like a big Big Ten job or a big SEC job. But this would be perfect for Chris Peterson. It's not a bad thought. And that's one that, look, he's just working for Fox right now. You actually could do this.
Yeah. Dion. No, I'm kidding. I just wanted to get him in there for SEO purposes.
Absolutely. You hear that, YouTube? We said Deion Sanders.
Is another one that's kind of a person who I think has routinely gotten a lot out of a little. Is Kalani Sitake. And we had this discussion with him. And like, I understand too with BYU, there's a certain type of player that you have to get, and that's not always the same thing as the type of player that Stanford would want to get. I just mean from somebody who
having a more limited pool
with limited pool, right? And he's been very successful, and BYU should probably be very good again. That's somebody who I might think about too.
Well, and also going with your BYU theory, though, BYU also has money. Like, if they want to keep Kalani Sitake, they can pay him.
Yeah. But those are the ones that jump out to me. I don't know if we're forgetting anybody, but
I think that's a pretty good list. It's hard because
groups. Let's rile up Kentucky fans again.
They're already mad at us for the basketball stuff earlier today. I don't know if we should do that, but it's a tough job because you are dealing with some pretty narrow confines of guys who can get into Stanford. Now, it is not the absolute, like a regular student applying to Stanford. You do get a little bit of allowance, but the pool of recruits for you versus the other schools you're dealing with in the ACC is significantly smaller. So you do have to deal with that. I'll give you one other one. Scott Abel just took the Rice job. He was at Davidson. But he's the type of guy, like, Davidson is a very high academic school that was playing in the Pioneer League. Do you know the last time that Stanford hired somebody from the Pioneer League was Jim Harbaugh, who was at University of San Diego, which is Pioneer League is non-scholarship Division I. Like, it is, you talk about limited pool, you talk about some high academic schools that don't give football scholarships, but you got to field a football team. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
MH Ortho, Jason Candle from Toledo. That's a good one. I like Jason Candle. Yeah. Mount Union guy, just has built a great culture at Toledo. I think he could succeed anywhere. I don't think the Stanford piece of it would intimidate him at all.
Clay Helton?
That might work. But I don't know. I don't know.
He's the current coach, so
yeah. It's going to be very interesting. Let's talk bigger picture with the GM stuff just for a few minutes, because we do need to address that. Like, we've seen Oklahoma hire a GM in Jim Nagy, he's reporting to the board chair. Like, he's not reporting to the head coach. So that feels like a similar deal with Andrew Luck's job. Like, we're going to see GMs who act like NFL GMs.
Yeah. Does this like make you feel different about Jim Nagy?
No.
Is this what they hired him?
No, that's what he was hired for.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. And there's a reason that role is different than the role at Georgia or the role at Notre Dame or the role at Ohio State. Like, our guy, Mark Pantoni, has a different role at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Because Ryan Day does not need that oversight. And Ross Bjork, the AD, does not feel like Ryan Day needs that sort of oversight. So they're not going to hire somebody like that.
Yeah. This is great. I think it's great. Like in terms of like a new impactful hire to talk about. It's not just the coach, but anytime any program hires a GM, like that's like the second biggest news story that you could possibly have in terms of hiring at a football program, right?
It is. And now if that person is going to chart the course of the, and remember, Stanford is without an AD right now. Bernard Muir just stepped down. So this is Andrew Luck's show.
Yeah. You know, you go into a position too where it's like you are in a really important spot. Like hiring a coach is amongst the most important thing imaginable in an athletic department. And all of a sudden, Andrew Luck, who just joined this, role here months ago, is now in front and center on trying to solve what wouldn't be a very easy problem to solve given the time of year.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
It is names that we were just naming off are like getting ready for spring football for their schools that are starting in like a week.
Yes.
Or are already happening. Yeah.
So you may have to go acting coach and then spend the fall trying to figure out who it's going to be. But look, Andrew Luck seems like a very capable person. As we said, dude's brilliant.
Yeah, he is.
Very, very interested to see how he handles this going forward. He's definitely probably gotten more than he bargained for with the GM job already. We'll talk about it more on tomorrow's show. If you're not already subscribed to Andy and Ari On3 in podcast form on your favorite podcast platforms, we'll do that. Also subscribe here at the On3 Sports YouTube channel. We're live weekday mornings, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. We talk college football every single day. We also talk some college basketball during the tournament. So subscribe and come join us. We'll talk to you again soon.